Your Honor, I am legally entitled to emotional damages for being excluded from a community celebration that directly impacted my standing as HOA president. That's what Patricia Summers actually said in court, standing there in her powder blue blazer with an HOA pin the size of a dinner plate. The judge took off his glasses and rubbed his temples before responding with barely contained disbelief. Are you seriously suing your neighbor for not inviting you to his wedding? Patricia nodded solemnly while clutching a 3-ring binder she had, labeled social violations and community harm documentation. I sat in the back row with my new wife, Emily, both of us trying not to burst out laughing. The judge didn't even try to hide his reaction. He actually chuckled before saying, "Ma'am, this is not a legitimate legal matter. This is an absolute waste of judicial resources, and frankly, the most ridiculous case I've seen in 30 years on the bench. Let me back up and explain how I ended up in small claims court being sued by my HOA president for the crime of not inviting her to my wedding. My name is Daniel Morrison, and I'm a 32-year-old software developer who made the mistake of buying a house in Riverside Gardens, a suburban neighborhood with an HOA run by Patricia Summers. Patricia wasn't just the HOA president. She was a force of nature who treated the position like she was running a small dictatorship. She once fined someone $300 for having their garbage cans visible from the street for 6 minutes past the approved window. She measured grass height with an actual ruler every Sunday morning. She had a color-coded violation system that she'd created herself, complete with a point system that nobody understood but everyone feared. I'd moved into the neighborhood about 18 months ago, keeping mostly to myself and following all the rules to avoid Patricia's wrath. I met Emily at a local coffee shop where she worked as a veterinary technician, and after dating for a year, I proposed. We planned a small backyard wedding with just 40 guests, mostly close family and a handful of friends. The last thing on my mind was inviting the HOA president who'd once accused me of disturbing the neighborhood aesthetic by having my car windows tinted 2% darker than regulation. The wedding was perfect. We had string lights, a small tent, Emily's cousin played acoustic guitar, and we kept the music at a reasonable volume that ended by 10 p.m. as per HOA guidelines. I thought I'd covered all my bases by filing the proper event notification form with the HOA office 2 weeks prior, as required for any gathering over 20 people. What I didn't anticipate was Patricia's reaction to not receiving a personal invitation. The trouble started the day after the wedding when I found a violation notice taped to my front door. It cited unauthorized event execution and failure to include HOA leadership in community bonding activities. The fine was $500. I thought it was a joke at first, but then came the emails. Patricia sent me 12 emails in 3 days, each one escalating in intensity. She claimed that as HOA president, she had a right to attend all significant neighborhood events to ensure compliance and maintain community standards. She actually used the phrase social exclusion trauma in one of them. I ignored the emails and contested the fine through the proper HOA channels, thinking that would be the end of it. But Patricia wasn't done. She called an emergency HOA meeting where she tried to pass a new rule requiring all residents to invite HOA board members to any personal celebrations held on HOA property. When that didn't pass, she started a campaign of petty harassment. Suddenly, I was getting violation notices for everything imaginable. My mailbox was apparently one in too far to the left. My driveway had a microscopic oil stain that violated the cleanliness standards. She even claimed my doorbell was too loud and disturbed the acoustic harmony of the street. Things reached a breaking point when Patricia actually filed a small claims lawsuit against me. She was seeking $3,000 in damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress, social standing degradation, and loss of community leadership credibility. She claimed that by deliberately excluding her from a major social event, I had undermined her authority and caused a reputational harm that affected her ability to lead the HOA effectively. She even itemized her damages, including $500 for therapeutic counseling she claimed she needed, $1,000 for loss of social capital, and $1,500 for what she called missed networking opportunities and celebratory participation rights. I couldn't believe I had to hire a lawyer for this nonsense. But my friend James, who practiced property law, agreed to represent me, mostly because he found the whole thing hilarious. We prepared for court by gathering evidence of Patricia's pattern of harassment and abuse of power. We had testimonies from 17 neighbors who'd been subjected to her ridiculous fines and power trips. We had copies of every absurd violation notice she'd ever issued, including one where she fines someone for having too many butterflies in their garden because it exceeded the approved wildlife density limits. The court date arrived, and Patricia showed up with a rolling briefcase and a PowerPoint presentation she'd prepared on her laptop. She wore a suit that looked like she was interviewing for CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and she brought color-coded tabs for all her evidence. She actually tried to present a 45-minute opening statement before the judge cut her off after 3 minutes. She had charts showing the social hierarchy of the neighborhood with herself at the top, and she created something called a social inclusion index that she claimed proved she should have been invited to any gathering over 10 people. When it was my turn to speak, I simply stated the facts. Patricia was not a friend, family member, or even a friendly acquaintance. She was the HOA president who had made my life difficult since the day I moved in. Wedding invitations are personal choices, not legal obligations. My lawyer, James, then presented our counter-evidence, showing Patricia's history of frivolous complaints and abuse of her HOA position. He read aloud some of her more ridiculous violations, including one where she fined a resident for having a garden gnome that she claimed was making an inappropriate facial expression. The judge's face went through a journey of emotions as he listened to both sides. When Patricia tried to argue that HOA presidents have special social privileges that are legally enforceable, he actually laughed out loud. Not a chuckle, but a full belly laugh that echoed through the courtroom. He composed himself and then delivered a scathing response that I'll never forget. He said, "Miss Summers, in my 30 years on the bench, I have seen many frivolous lawsuits, but this takes the cake. No wedding pun intended. You have no legal standing, no legitimate damages, and frankly, no common sense if you think you can sue someone for not inviting you to their wedding." He continued by saying that Patricia's lawsuit was so egregiously frivolous that he was considering sanctions. He told her that HOA positions are administrative roles, not social monarchies, and that she had grossly misunderstood both her authority and basic social norms. The case was dismissed with prejudice, meaning she could never file this lawsuit again. But the judge wasn't done. He also ordered Patricia to pay my legal fees, which came to $4,500, and warned her that any further harassment would result in a restraining order. The aftermath was swift and brutal for Patricia. News of the lawsuit spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Someone leaked the story to the local news, and it went viral on social media with the headline, HOA, Karen sues neighbor for wedding snub, gets laughed out of court. The story was picked up by national outlets, and Patricia became the poster child for HOA overreach. Her photo was turned into memes, with captions like "When you think HOA stands for hugely obnoxious a-hole." The HOA board called an emergency meeting within a week. The community turnout was unprecedented, with over 200 residents showing up to demand Patricia's resignation. People shared stories of her tyrannical rule, from the woman she fined for having the wrong shade of white curtains to the man she tried to evict for flying a flag on a non-designated flag holiday. The board voted unanimously to remove her from her position, effective immediately. They also passed new bylaws limiting the power of future HOA presidents to prevent another Patricia situation. But the consequences didn't stop there. Patricia worked as a real estate agent, and her brokerage started receiving calls from people saying they'd never work with someone who sued a neighbor over a wedding invitation. Her broker called her in for a meeting and strongly suggested she take a leave of absence until the situation died down. Her professional reputation was in ruins. She'd built her entire identity around being the HOA president and a successful real estate agent, and both were crumbling simultaneously. The final blow came when the State Real Estate Commission opened an investigation into her conduct, as several former clients came forward claiming she'd been equally unreasonable in her professional dealings. They found multiple instances where she'd acted unethically, using her bonuses position to pressure people into buying or selling homes. Her real estate license was suspended for 2 years, and she was fined $15,000 by the commission. When the registered letter arrived at her house with the suspension notice, Patricia stood in her driveway reading it with shaking hands, her face turning from red to white as the reality of her situation hit her. She looked up to see several neighbors watching from their windows, and for the first time since anyone could,